We are serving meals to the most vulnerable population. Second piece of misinformation that the community doesn't really pick up on is they assume all of our meals are going to homeless individuals, and it doesn't. We feed homeless, for sure. However, not everybody that comes in my door is homeless. One of the most challenging things is getting that message out to the community that part of what we do is the prevention of homelessness. So if I'm serving a meal to a homeless individual, someone has failed that person, and I'm dealing with their failure because I'm feeding them. But when I'm feeding the next person who comes in and they're not homeless, that's a huge part of what our mission is all about, is feeding the population and supporting them as best we can to prevent them from being homeless. And, when people look at the numbers, I always say, so on an average evening, we're probably doing about 130 meals in an evening.
Wow.
Of those 30 meals, maybe 50 to 60 would be individuals who would be considered homeless. But the rest of the meals are people who are coming in. I always like to point out the evening one because it's a different population. The evening meal tends to be families. It tends to be single individuals with 2 or 3 kids. I want to come in because our meal program, our breakfast and lunches are always, there are a to-go option, but our breakfast and lunches are dine-in. But our evening meal is to go. So that means if I'm a single mom or a single dad with 2 or 3 kids at home, I'm going to come in, I can grab these 3 or 4 meals. Mm-hmm. Tonight is, what are we doing? Chili cheese sausage dogs. Mm. Okay, so I can pick up with a salad and probably, some kind of a protein as well. So a protein and a salad, we go by Canada's Food Guide. But I can come in and pick up those 3 or 4 meals and take them home. Mm-hmm. And I can still eat with my kids. And that keeps me from being homeless. It keeps the lights on. It keeps the rent paid. It allows me to do that. Yeah. That's what people mistake in thinking that all we do is serve homeless. We serve a population to prevent those individuals from becoming homeless.
That's news to me. It is. I totally thought it was for homeless people who, and especially, you had kind of mentioned a little bit before we started talking on the podcast about, this year donations were down. I was going to say just in this climate, right? With the cost of food and the cost of everything. Have you seen your numbers gone up, but unfortunately donations gone down? Has that been kind of a...
We went up when prices started to go up for food. We started to see an increase in folks coming in, and everything went up. And the thing is, once you build up a trust with these individuals, they tell you, and I remember the one lady came in and she said, my rent just went up $200. And I said, well, how much do you pay? And she said, well, I was paying $800. I said, now you're paying $1,000 a month? She said, yeah. I said, no, they can't legally do that. No. She said, well, but to get onto an appeals process is 6 months. And the landlord said, all I have to do is just tell people that my brother-in-law is moving in and I can evict you now. So you need to pay me another $200. So she said, so my $200 for food, and she's got 2 kids. She said, my $200 for food has now gone to rent. Yeah. So I don't have any money coming in for the next 2 weeks. And here I am. I said, well, here's your meals. And especially if they've got kids, and we know they have kids, we'll make sure they've got extra stuff, juice and maybe some, granola bars and yogurt and extra stuff to help the kids out. Yeah. And I said, yeah, by all means. And she was just so grateful that, there's no questions asked. We just, I always tell people, people say, do you ask any questions? I always tell people, I'm just glad they're here. Yeah. So I don't ask why they're here. Yeah. It's none of my business. Yeah. But they do.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to that, to the stigma of coming to the gathering place? Because the food's gone up. I'm a single person. I was listening to CBC and they had somebody on and they were talking about, that so many more people are going to places like the gathering place. They're going to the food bank. They're going to, and I'm thinking to myself, I couldn't imagine. I think that would be, I would feel ashamed in some way to come here, even though I needed the help. And I don't, I would never judge anybody else for coming here. But if I had to come here, there would be a great sense of shame. And I don't know if that's something that you kind of see when people come
So we've seen it. I'm going to say we have seen it, and we work to fight it. I work to fight it. We try to be as embracing and as supportive and as warm and inviting as we possibly can be. We make sure that, we try to make the place as bright as it can be, and as inviting and as warm and as supportive, because we recognize that. We recognize how difficult it is for anyone to come in our door and say, I need some food now. And it's difficult. And especially because when you have to come to any place, whether it's ours, whether it's a food bank, any kind of a church meal programming like that, it's always been seen by and I'm not going to say the community, it makes it sound like North Bay is mean. It's always been seen by society as, you're coming into a soup kitchen, you failed.
You have failed.
And it's interesting because I have a bit of a different opinion, is when you're coming into my soup kitchen, you haven't failed, but something has failed.
Yeah. Or
someone has failed.
Yeah.
And if you're coming in here, something's gone wrong, but I can just do triage.
Yeah.
And often what we're doing is, it's funny because often what we do is I tell people all the time, we're doing food triage, but it's also triage.
Yeah.
And they're coming in, and of course they're stressed. And I remember saying when I started how we have to work harder to eliminate how stressful it must be to come to this place. As friendly and as loving as we can be, it's still very stressful. And it is. You are seen as a failure. Oh my God, I got to go to a soup kitchen.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, first of all, our food's really good.
Yeah.
And we work really hard to make sure that the food is as good as it possibly can be. And it's healthy, and it's good healthy proportions. So it's so that we can keep you healthy until you need to not be, to not use our service. The other thing too is what we're seeing now is more of the working poor. And they've done and they're working as hard as they can. And they don't have time at the end of the day to go home and make a meal for their two kids. So if I grab this, rather than go to, an unhealthy food choice, I can come here, the food is healthy, the kids will like it, they're very supportive, and I can go home and be okay. We've also seen that with an increasing change in our demographics. We are seeing more women coming in than we used to. We're seeing more seniors than we used to. So it's funny because I would say that sense of failure versus your sense of pride, I think is starting to shift. And some of the groups that we see now, we probably feed 20 to 25 international students a day coming in. Because one of the things that we focus on here is who is vulnerable, right? When you talk about a vulnerable population, we talk about food insecurity versus vulnerability. And when you talk about students like the international students, they are vulnerable. They have food insecurity issues. They have housing issues. They have stress of exams. They have, especially international students, are trying to navigate a country, a bus system, a weather pattern.
Yeah,
these poor kids are coming in here, and they're like their bodies are not ready for this, and they're trying to navigate all of that, trying to navigate a language that they don't completely understand, and trying to navigate school and class and tests, etc. And at the same time, try to work with and they want to get a job, but they're having trouble finding a job, and they have to do all this. And at the meantime, and I'm also hungry.